time is limited. We're on our last afternoon of this. Some say they saved the best till last. I couldn't possibly comment. So welcome to our panel. Welcome to joining us. If anything, this is one of the most valuable sessions here for longevity of the cider sector, for the future, and not just of our sector, but of the orchards we all cherish. Somewhere between 50% and 2/3 of cider producers, by number, not volume, are below 7,000 litres. So for those who do want to rise above this figure, this threshold, and grow further, and those of us who have gone beyond, but also need to go further to make it a sustainable business, how is it done? I'm thrilled we've got 4 trailblazers, and I say that word advisedly. They've built their businesses over the years, and we're going to hear how. Some are smaller than others, all are still looking to the future, and all have the quality of fruit at their heart. Please can I ask all those who are with us to put their questions into the Q&A, and I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll pick them up, providing we have time at the end, or you can catch people by sending them messages and things like that. But before we head on into our discussion proper, I just want to share a few images of our wonderful pack, and I'm just going to take you through there, and bear with me as I just get this going. This has been such a learning curve, I have to say, and go away. Thrilled. Thank you, CraftCon, for inviting us. I'm going to start with Polly Hilton, who runs Find and Foster with her husband Matt in Devon. With agricultural studies in the pocket, Polly realised there was a way to rescue neglected orchards in her home county, took advice, volunteered, and kicked off with wonderful, complex, traditional method ciders. Hogan's cider, our next panelist, has been on the market since 2005. Based in Warwickshire and pressing in Worcestershire, the business Alan and Jane have built is seen across all of hospitality, from pubs to restaurants, and Europe and further afield, but also Europe, because I often meet Alan when he's winning awards at Cider World in Frankfurt, pictured here. Fast forward a decade, and Charlotte Johnson has been running Meon Valley Cider in the South Downs in Hampshire with her husband Nigel since 2015. Her previous careers as offshore construction engineer and city investment banker are no doubt being put to good use these days. For them, it's the natural wonders of the local landscape they want to cherish, including the dancing bramley trees you can see here. Last but by no means least, the irrepressible Barny Butterfield, whose wonderful cider works in Crediton, Devon, has a sibling in the Innovation Cider House at Darts Farm. I look forward to hearing more about that. Most recently, Barney awarded the first Breakthrough Cider Maker of the Year, another initiative of his, to Kingsley Ash, Thornborough Cider, pictured here. So that's who our panel is. And now I want to kick into the discussion proper. So I want to ask each of you, and I'll direct the questions, and I'll ask people to be on mute if they're not answering. I want to ask the same question initially to each of you. So could you just give us a very brief snapshot? How many in your team? The volume of your sales at the moment, if you'd like to share that. But most importantly, what was the trigger point that made you decide to make cider a real business rather than a wonderful hobby? So I'd like to start with Barney, please.
I would usually lie about this, Susanna, but my wife is within earshot, so I can't. The truth is that I'd been fiddling along for best part of 10 years with my cider hobby. It was, we were earning a few quid out of it, but that's what it was. And we also have a busy farm, and we were sitting down one night after another kind of 17-hour day split between various jobs and things that I've been doing. And she said, you got 2 years, you turn this into a business or you make enough for yourself. And so that was that was the eventual trigger. That was about 2009 when I went from being in the kind of 7,000 litre pocket to then driving up through the gears. So maybe a bit earlier, 2007 maybe. Yeah, right. But that was kind of when it happened. Yeah,
there was promise, and then there was a deadline. So sounds like a journalist to me as well. Polly, can I ask you, what was the trigger?
And, I never made cider as a hobby, and it's just a bloody lucky that I can, because it was just kind of interest in orchards and just realizing that so close to my house is a lot of really old orchards where most of the time the fruit's going to waste, and the orchard really needs some looking after, and the owners usually don't have the time or the resource or maybe the money to do it. So my aim was to try and make looking after these orchards a kind of economically viable thing to do. So I had to, from the beginning, think, how do you take this environment and make it economically viable again? So that was about 5 years ago. It wasn't necessarily going to be cider. It became cider. And there's just me. Well, it started out just me, but my husband Matt has got more and more involved over time, and also he kind of has always supported me financially while I've been trying to make this
make it all work
for me.
It does take a little while, doesn't it? Charlotte, I'd like to put the same question to you. What was that trigger?
The trigger was that we moved to this wonderful place, the Meon Valley, beautiful place, and we wanted to do something here that would reflect that identity. It was always going to be a business from day one, which we're still working on, as they say. And it's I think it's a way as well, with very much for us, because we've moved from in terms of connecting with the community. We've met some unbelievably brilliant people. And certainly during lockdown, it's just been amazing to see people's, nimbleness in changing their business models, all that kind of thing. So, but it's always been a business from day one, and it continues to be. And,
So
we love great cider, but at the end of the day, I totally agree with you. It has to be a sustainable business at the end of the day.
Okay, and Alan, what was it that pushed you over and said, right?
A bit of a midlife crisis, really. I had a career in the IT industry, realizing that I wasn't enjoying it, but I had this hobby, and it was really, that was the motivation. It was getting away from what I was doing, previously. But the other thing is that I just found it so rewarding taking a product that's indigenous to these shores, turning it into something that people will pay for. I find that quite compelling, and I remember doing farmers markets in the early days, and I turn up at Stratford, near where we live, serve the cider to somebody, and then a month later, a queue wanting to buy more, and that's pretty compelling. So the joy of making it, but also a desire to get away from what I the adage of if you're a cider maker, you want to end up with a small fortune, you have to start with a large one. I didn't have a large fortune, but anyway, we're viable, which is good.
Yes, and you've survived out the last pandemic, so now we're looking to the future.
I don't know. I mean, from a point of view of size of team, we've got our year before last. Let's not count this most recent year, but the year before that, we probably sold about 400,000 litres, something like that.
Right. Well, that's a wonderful thing. So the thing is, to get to that stage, anyone is going to need finance. You know, we don't all have amazing pots of gold buried underneath the apple trees. So it's always a challenge, that one. And there's many ways, whether it's grants or whether it's taking an investment. I'd just like to ask each of you, what was the route that you have taken? Others simply invest year on year, and it's a slow and steady space. Barney, can I start with you on this one, please? Oh, you're still on mute, I think. Sorry. There we go.
Hopefully I'm.
Right.
Am I? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So the first thing I realised is I was going to have to commit to understanding the process, because I definitely didn't have the money to start with. So I needed to understand it so that when I was buying kit, I didn't have to overspend. And I boxed very clever, and I still do to this day. I want to exhaust second-hand opportunities before under the wheels of a new acquisition. But buy well. When you buy new, buy well. I would definitely want people to focus on that. And then in terms of, I reinvested everything. You know, it was, building the business is what I wanted to do, and still. First and foremost, if anyone's thinking that the great or drugs, or because it ain't. It's a graft. It's but a route to financial employ and
okay,
relationship with the bank.
Yes, I'm definitely still working on that one, that's for sure. I'm not sure if it's just me. Barney was a wee bit crackly, but we got the gist of it, so that's good. Alan, how about you? Was it good relationships with the bank manager, or did you get grants, or?
Yeah, well, it was, and we were very small, so it didn't require a huge amount. But of errors in that department. First press we bought was far too small. We then invested in the second press. These were a bit foolhardy decisions. We should have looked at it and planned in advance. I've that I have a brother who, in his field, he provided funds for the business to allow us to grow. I've commercial loan, if at all. We haven't done that exclusively, but finance if we can. And as Barney said, we reinvest quite heavily. There are some things I think now. I think crowd is really interesting. It's but it seems to be and also adding to your following as well. But I'm not sure where it now. But the other thing is work really hard on getting do that in the early days. Now with almost religious fervor, we have somebody dedicated to it. And if you can't afford to have somebody, certainly do it yourself. Lesson that we learned. So make sure you're in.
That's a very timely tip. One question I'm just going to pick up now, Emma. In terms of litres, Polly, am I right? You were around the 7,000 mark.
Yeah, so from the beginning, I started by making just like 300 litres 5 years ago, and just every year made a little bit more. And actually, we really struggled to make more. And last year was the first time we filled all the tanks, and I've started thinking it's possible to make more. But yeah, so last year we filled about 6,500 litres, but it was really hard to. I was always amazed people could reach that point, and I was pretty amazed when we did. Yeah, so very small compared to the rest of people.
And have you had any grants along the way?
Yeah, so I started with a grant for £3,000 from the Henry Plum Foundation, and so I just bought anything what I could afford with that. So a second-hand mill, a second-hand very small press, and some very small tanks. Yeah, so and then have always just made a tiny bit more over a year and reinvested, and then did get the leader funding, which is a grant that meets 40% of your cost, which is really an amazing thing for cider makers to be able to access. But then you have to have the money there in the first place to be able to spend, because they'll only meet 40%. So I kick myself for not trying to get a loan to buy more with that, because now I've just had to buy a labelling machine, which had I been able to get a loan before, I could have got 40% that, but I didn't. So I've always been really, really cautious with spending, really, really cautious, and perhaps I should have been braver with things like bank loans.
Well, it's a tough one. I think we're all by nature cautious, but then that things will evolve and we won't lose out that way. I do know one of the things Barny has said to me in the past is kind of look to the future. So I'm now going to try and look rather 5 years rather than 3 years.
Yeah.
Charlotte, am I right? You're around 20,000 litres at the moment.
We're 20,000 litres. I mean, we started up on what we call a low capex strategy, which is basically we had contracted out, particularly in order to make the step from 7 to 20. So, for example, in bag and box, we got Angus Whitehead up the road here, is only 7 miles away, to do all our bag and boxing.
Yes.
I would say our best investment has been a £1,000 forklift truck, which we got second-hand from Hill Farm Juice, which was probably the steal of the century. And then my worst investment has been a flash pasteurizer, because we've only had it 2 years. In the first year, the farmer, because we have been sort of co-building our farm barn, didn't get the mains electricity until September, which of course the summer season was over. And then obviously last year, instead of being 50-50 draft bottles, we've been 95% bottles. But we've managed to get ahead of sales the year, even in the COVID year, so it's been pretty resilient. So you never know. Although you make your business plan, there are things that come up that
I think a fluid business plan is definitely one that gets revisited. So we've obviously talked about the apples, the most magical ingredient, and that's what makes each of our ciders so special. So unlike brewing, obviously there's not a constant supply of that. I can't just go and get off the shelf however much malt I want. So I want to ask Alan and Barny, how do you ensure quality with your apples or your pears as you grow? Let's start with Alan, please. Alan, you're on mute. I'll just... Brilliant. Yeah, there we go. I can. It's a little bit patchy, so we may... Right.
A guy called David Weaver in the Malvern Hills. He's an apple merchant as well, to supply us with the quality of fruit that we need. Cheaper.
Alan, I'm just going to jump in. Can someone tell me? Can everyone else hear Alan? Okay, or is it a bit scratchy? A bit scratchy? Yeah, Alan. I'll just go to Barny now, and then we'll come back to you. It was Barny. Can I ask you how you're keeping an eye on the apple quality? Yes, now you are spot on.
Great. I've moved my location. Well, we took the rather daunting decision, but for us, essential of contracting growers. So we've planted many thousands of new apple trees to the varieties we want, and I walk those orchards. So we have our own orchards as well. We've got probably 30 acres of our own orchard, and then wider orchard around, stretching to about 400 acres. And that of very unproductive old orchards that we continue to prune and maintain, because they're the orchards that we all grew up with. And one thing it gives to hand back and hand on the most glorious landscape that humanity has ever envisaged. And if we don't do a little bit of that, then it's a poor show. And then working with local growers who've invested their own money into supplying the maker. And so that's where we are. Fruit quality is utterly critical. I cannot emphasize enough how important it is that to allow that to be someone else's problem could only happen if you have utter faith in that other person. So because for me, I need to see my apples. I need to know, because a lot of growers the trees while they're still full of starch. That's not going to make good cider. And the same comes with quality, rots, debris. None of that you'd want to put in your vat. So yeah, we've had to bite the bullet, and we're in 25-year-long relationships with farmers in our valley, and that. So yeah, it's that. But you don't have to do that to start with. Don't get yourself tied up too early.
Brilliant. Well, thank you. Alan, let's come back to you. And you were talking about David Weaver, I think. And what I would say is, if we're finding the signal is a bit not quite as what we want, maybe if we might have to turn the video off, but then we might still hear you. So do fire away. What were you saying about working with, I think, David Weaver? And we might have frozen there. Alan, can you hear us? Okay, Alan might need to rejoin. I'm not quite sure, or we might get a bit of advice.
Anything really. I can't decide from what people are
saying. No, we are. So, Alan, would you like to refresh, and or join again, and then hopefully we'll be able to catch up with you. And in the meantime. If you leave and rejoin, and in the meantime, I'm going to get onto another of your favorite topics, which is marketing. So I'll let Alan in as soon as we get there. But I wanted to, it is all about the market. We're making this wonderful liquid. We've got to get it out there. I wanted to ask you specifically how you decided where to target. I want to start with you, Polly, because I think early on it was an important part of your planning, as I understand. I wonder if you could share a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think because I make so little, choosing who sells the cider and who's going to represent my cider is a really important part of it, because I need to there's such a small amount, I need to maximize kind of who sees it and how it's communicated, and also I guess because of the cost of my bottles, they often kind of need to be communicated, which means a lot of I from the beginning started working with Felix from the Fine Cider Company, and I'm really lucky I have, because he's been incredible at communicating and trying to tell people why cider should be kind of respected and valued. And working with Felix has been the best decision I ever made. And it often means that it ends up in restaurants on menus where it's being served by a sommelier, so someone who's really well qualified and maybe comes and visits and sees what we do and really gets to understand the process, and us goes to they serve the cider, so the person who's drinking it totally understands it, and that's a really important part for me. And then now also working with Alex Fitton at True Vale to sell in the Southwest as well. So choosing who to work with has been really important, but also kind of envisaging who's going to be the kind of person who's going to be willing to buy your product has been important too. So targeting. Yeah. I've really tried not to, with things like branding, I've tried not to kind of exclude any certain groups from who it might appeal to. So I had a mentor from the very beginning, and he would just give me very useful bits of advice, like never underestimate the grey pound, and just things like that have meant I've kind of tried to understand, who might be interested in my product, which is going to be someone who is up for making a maybe adventurous decision in what they try.
Yes, an explorer, but someone who values craft. So market segmentation from the start, but evolving and choosing the right people. What's been the most valuable marketing route for you? I'd like to ask Barny that. There's many out there, and are you finding social media is very useful, or are you finding that the traditional ways, or what's over the years, what have you found, and what are you finding today?
So I think that living in, on a travel later, aren't we? We've never experienced markets changing at such pace because of COVID. So in common, I'm sure, with everybody, we've had to maybe none of us are terribly interested. And how you do your business online is very different to how we would, I'm proudest and genuinely proudest of the relationships that I have with the pubs in my valley. That's because it's who I am. I love being in the pub. I love being around pubs, and so the relationship with publicans, face to face, genuine relationships, and with the rest of my team, that'll never be replaced. That's going nowhere. The difference is that people have now got the ability, by using to come and find you. Whether you're large or small, so our job as cider makers is to make ourselves, first of all, findable, and hopefully make the journey. If someone wishes to buy your product, let's keep that simple. Price is an entirely different matter. Price is so elastic in the drinks industry. If we don't play in the higher end market. It's we kind of with the segment, as it were, that we look after, and we're happy with so much room. People are interested in exploring, but I would say you've no option. You've got to have some social media presence. You've got to be able to sell online. If you're serious, if you're not, if you're making it because you want to impress your neighbours and have a few people, great, not important. But now it's gone beyond an option. Now, that's categoric. And then go and learn from the guys that do it well, because there are some people that do it exceptionally, and it's right there in front. Their homework is in front of you. So
now, also, I think
that doesn't mean copy, because that's really tedious and people won't enjoy it. But
you had a thought on photography as well, I believe.
Yeah, don't underestimate the value of images. I've had a problem today, actually. Just came back and I'm just not happy with them. That we're getting a shorter amount of time to convince what we have is credible. and we're looking at something on an LCD screen for a couple of seconds. If that is a terrible iPhone photograph, flat as a sheet of paper, the colors are washed out, you're not a great photographer, then it's just not going to look as good. So don't undervalue the services of a good photographer. We all really concentrate on our imagery right across the whole of the cider market. If we really do let those products shine, we're going to grow. We'll see cider pulling out into the other segments. If we, one of the things some people say to me, "Oh, I don't, I like looking homespun. I like looking small. I like looking rest of it." Trust me, we all still do. As hard as we try, we're all still going to look small because we are small. We're not Heineken. We're not Coors. We're not Carlsberg. You're going to be. So do really and spend that money. It will pay you back.
Thank you, Barney. That's absolutely fascinating. And Emma Jordan has just popped in the chat that a photographer friend took some of their orchard and it's had more shares. They got more likes in the past few days than they've had all year. So that's very interesting. Now, and in terms of marketing, Charlotte, I want to ask you, how do you go about expanding your customer pool? And I'm partly thinking about this because I know you've got an exciting launch coming up. So I'm imagining that you're thinking through how to, make a little break or so. I'd just like to ask you.
Well, we sort of got to what I call base camp 1, which is thinking of Everest, is that, we're serving a local market, but certainly going national is a bigger step. We were very lucky that we won an award in our second year of cider making, which was a Southern Regional Award at the Camera Reading, and that immediately gave us access to important national wholesalers. So also the other thing you've got to market, people you've got to market to, the wholesalers are going to take it national, as well as your actual local market, as it were. We always set out with the ambition, base camp 1, to have a range of 3 accessible ciders, and that's been very resilient since we started. But we're now launching our Egremont single varietal 2018, which is in Sauterne barrels in the 750, and later on this year we're planning to launch our keg cider, which is a 4.5 fruity session 4.5 cider. So that's going to be a whole new world to a certain extent. We're lucky we do have some quite key craft cider businesses craft beer businesses on the south coast, like Unity Brewery and people like them. So hopefully we're going to do some sort of collaboration with them, which will potentially help us, expand that kind of market. But going national, we're also listening to, I'm very keen to see about exports, because we have been contacted by a number of exporters, and I'm keen to hear the sort of panel's experience on getting into the export market, whether it's worthwhile and does it expand your volume, or do you just lose your margin, I suppose.
Well, that's very interesting, and we will move on to that. Now, if I hope Alan will be able to rejoin us. I'm not exactly sure. I think he must have been out doing the rounds with the deliveries. But we were going to ask him about Grub in Manchester, which is one of the places he's worked with. So what he's been doing is he's very much realised that if you can get into the food and drink establishments, so he's working with some restaurants and other, so he's expanded a lot into that almost craft beer sphere, and he's certainly put in the legwork. So I think that's another thing. Do look elsewhere and see what else is thriving, and yes, perhaps look beyond simply our cider sphere, as it were. And on to exports. That is a very interesting question. Barney, I'd really like to start with you on that, please. What do you feel are the value? Are you exporting these days? How is it going for you?
really, yeah, I'm not my. I'm not
It's
sure
been a
you want to
tough one,
hear.
has it?
It's not all roses. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
Let's just say that
Mm.
the lure of export is extraordinary because it's just put it in a box, and even if you're not getting great margin, it's gone, and you can, you haven't affected your local market, any of that kind of stuff, and it's exciting. So what I love about export is I can boast to my mates in the pub, I've been sold in Russia, I've been sold in. If they actually asked to see my barrelage, then I would be much, much, much more heartbroken if I lose my local cricket club than if I was to lose most of my export. And I think the reason for that is not actually because export is bad, but there is learning in it. The reason is, I'm not an exporter. I don't know the local market. Key people is that I should be talking to. What happens is, and what will happen to a lot of guys is the phone will ring and you say hello, and they'll say, "Oh, I'm in Helsinki and I'd like some cider," and you go, "Oh, brilliant!" And away you go. The reactive instincts of export are just impossible to get away from. And if you really want to get export right, part of your strategy like it has to be everything else. That's the horrible truth. We got lucky on a couple of occasions and I had to destroy thousands of cans. I've had product problems. I had a keg explode in Tokyo. And it's challenging. I've got problems right now in Australia with a batch. You don't have control over your product. Here are the bad things. You don't have the control over your product. You probably don't really know the exporter. Probably don't know the end market that well. So, when you put all those things together, there's more risk involved in export, quite honestly, than there's obvious reward. Market. So there you go. So yeah, seller beware.
I think it does come back to, as you've said earlier, relationships, doesn't it? And if you can really, in the same way, if you can really trust your apple provider, if you can form that bond where you're going. Tom Tibbets has made a very good point. Is there any point in trying to sell into the EU as a small producer post-Brexit? The amount of paperwork, I just have yet to get through any of it. So I'm not there yet. But where there is interest, I think, as Barney says, it's going to take a lot of time. And also, probably we're going to have to factor in finding experts, like you say, Barney. I would say, so actually, just before we came on air, as it were, Alan was telling us he's exporting to Ukraine, to Russia. I can't remember where the other country he mentioned just off the bat there. So I think where there are established things working, that's good. We're exporting to Japan, Little Pomona that is, and we're just starting in the States. And what I can see, and Barney, we're lucky enough we're going to be working with the guys from Ancho. So what I can see is that very committed bunch, which is what we all want. And I can see we're going to have to do a fair bit of running our way, but we're taking the view that to be with the right partner over there will help us. And so, Charlotte, actually, in answer to your question, we're hoping we can build it as part of the future. Polly, I know you're reflecting on some of this, and I'm not sure what your thoughts are.
I'm just finding it really, really valuable to hear what Barney said and what you were saying, and it's a shame that sorry, I can't remember his name, is not here anymore, because I would have been really interested to hear what he says too. And I think it's, when you produce such a small amount, and maybe it seems a bit silly to export because I'd never be able to sell enough to all the places that would buy in this country anyway. Mm-hmm. But what Barney said is so true. There's the temptation to think, yeah, it's cool, my cider is in New York, that's pretty amazing, I never thought that would happen. So it is tempting, and I'm hoping that someone I'm I've just started to work with who seems like a really, really reliable and helpful and trustworthy kind of importer in New York. Are kind of doing all the paperwork for me, and I'm hoping just to export a really small amount there, and I'm just hoping I don't get half of the problems Barney mentioned. But I mean, it's a scary thought. Bottles exploding in New York is a lot more difficult to deal with than bottles exploding in England, which hopefully that never happens anyway. But yeah, that kind of distance and difficulty in communication and stuff, that it's a concern. But yeah, I've got a lot to learn from people on this.
Yes, it is an interesting, and maybe it's something CraftCon can return to, because I think you're right, insight, and it does eat up the time, but then doesn't everything. So advice, I would like to ask you, what's the best business building tip you could offer our audience today? Something maybe you've learnt, or something you wish you'd have known right at the beginning. Charlotte, I'm going to start with you, please.
I think it would be probably best to say that we kind of dived into the pool with absolutely no experience of the industry, which, it's not the best thing really, but it was a romantic notion. But at the end of the day, it's been enormous fun, and we really enjoyed it, and we continue to enjoy it. And it's been very rewarding in a whole host of levels, environmental and all that kind of thing. I think the social media is the crucial thing, because we are tiny businesses, and actually the social media aspect is absolutely essential in raising.
So it's worth the time. It's worth the time that it's worth the time.
Yeah,
you have to invest. You
have to invest in the social media to get, for us really, from the conversation we were having, it's for us, we're kind of going regional to national, and that's absolutely essential. Your social media and how you promote yourself in that sphere.
Okay, thank you. Barney, what would you offer?
Be confident. Back yourself. I could tell you a joke. I heard a Billy Connolly joke, right? And that's when I decided to go on my own, and I was going to do it, right? And the joke is there's two Scottish cameramen on the Serengeti, and they're filming lions, right? And then Jock turns to, says Jock and Willie, and Jock says, Willie, the wind's changed and the lions can smell us. I said, Jock, what the hell are you doing? Putting on a pair of running shoes. He said, you'll never outrun a lion. He says, no, Jock, but I'll outrun you. And the best have to be the best in the world.
Barney, I think you've frozen. You don't have to be the best in the world. Now, I was seeing a tip. Is it F5 to refresh? I'm not quite sure. I think I saw that on the chat. And then we can get the end of the joke. Yes, F5. Thanks, Tom. So Barney, could you press F5 if you're on Windows? And in the meantime, Polly, I'd like to ask you, I'd like to ask you about mentors and what you feel the value of mentors can be.
Yeah, I think I've always really tried to learn as much as I can from other people, and just always be aware that other people know more than you, especially when I've hardly been doing this any time at all, and I just have a huge amount to learn, and have really welcomed mentors and what advice they have to give. But then also, if you're given a mentor, if it doesn't work for you, then find a mentor who does work for you. And I would strongly recommend mentors, because they just, especially, I'm not very business minded, so I've had a mentor who could kind of give me advice in that area, and that's been really, really useful.
And I would say also, even if it's not been an arrangement that's been set up if you have a question, go and find someone to ask, because we've all been there and we'd all like to help other people. So we when we started, we asked a lot of questions of our local producers, etc. And now we're delighted to get questions back. So I think that's important. Let's look a little bit to the future. I'm just going to let Barney back in, and then maybe we'll get the end of, before we move on, maybe we'll get the end of the end of the joke, Barney. We got to the bit where you said you don't have to be the best, and then it all froze.
Yeah, well, that's sorry, guys. I'd moved to 4G through my phone to stay online, and then it was in the window and got hot. So then I do apologise to everybody. Yeah, you don't. Trying to be the best is a real headache for anyone. There's no point. If you can just be better than you were yesterday, if you could just keep in front of the people who are a yard behind, if you stay honest and enjoy your work, you're going to do fine. So people should feel brave enough. And the other thing that I regret, and I'm still like it, 20 years in, more. If you've decided you're going to be a cider maker, then you probably do need that bigger pump, right? You can buy it because you're going to need it for the rest of your career, and you can sell it afterwards. So a lot of the time we're trying to make a cost benefit analysis on if something will pay us back within a given time frame. But ask yourself, what does this look like in 5 years if everything goes right? Even if it mostly goes right, then crack on and do it, because otherwise you're going to be replacing that piece of kit 4 or 5 times. And you know what? There's nothing worse than changing kit, because it takes your life away. It's just a time sapping thing. So buy bigger than you think. Because you can move into it. And hey, if you've got something that's big and makes your life easier, and you've overspent, so what? At least you've got more of your own time back. So trust yourself and buy bigger than you think. There you go.
Thank you, Barney. And that's very, very positive. And looking to the future, I'd like to give each of you a minute to talk about one project that you're hoping to follow up over the next 12 months, and perhaps the economic rationale behind it. And then we're going to go to questions in the Q&A. So Charlotte, please, what's on your
absolutely.
cards?
We spend a lot. We're not have the fortune of outbuildings on a farm or own property, so we rent our premises. So we've got to make more use of our premises. And one of the things, although we started out doing farmers markets, we don't do those anymore, because we realised that on these events they take your profit margin away in the main. But you have to start doing that. We targeted the farmer shops, which has been marvellous during lockdown, and it's really paid off, because these farm shops they visit all these events and then they choose what to put in their farm shops. But going back to the premises, we're definitely going to make better use of our premises by doing a pop-up events during the summer, once we got all this nonsense, all the restrictions, and doing much more kind of off sales from our premises. We're fortunate we're an hour from London. There's glamping, South Downs Way, cycling. So we do have quite a lot of footfall going through West Meon, and we definitely got to capture much more of that.
So you're going to think about the experiences. Is there anything new on the product side you want to share with us?
Yeah, we're very excited about our new launch of our 750 Eggermont russets, which in fact we've been tasting at lunchtime with my mum, and it's going well. But we're doing it in trial stages, and on Tuesday we're going to have our first bottles arrive, and we're going to have to learn from scratch, including the Italian instructions about how to use the bottling machine. So
there we go. It's all go. Brilliant. And Polly, what's next on your horizons with Find and Foster?
Very similar to Charlotte, actually. We also rent a premises and really want to make more of it and try and make it pay for itself. And just also welcome people to it, because it's a really, really beautiful spot. So we are planning to do monthly tour and tastings, and we're working with someone called Debbie, who's the Wild Wine Woman on Instagram, and she's going to be, this is kind of just where another bit of business advice, if you're not very good at something, ask someone else to help. She's very good at kind of speaking to a whole big group of people and welcoming them and educating them on cider and wine. And so we're going to work with Debbie to do these tour and tastings and make it a really worthwhile thing to come to. So we'll provide lunch and a tour and tasting, and she's really highly qualified with, I think she is WSET 3 or something, but she's an instructor, so she's going to do to tasting. We'll put lunch on and just make more of our cidery.
So really adding value to the experience and making it.
Yeah.
Barney, something from you?
Our biggest thing that we're up to this year, actually sounds like we're all looking at talking directly to consumers, and that's hugely exciting because it's the most permanent way to fix a new recruit into the world of cider. We've been working for quite some time at Darts on a new cidery where we're turning the cidery inside out, bringing people into it. And we're hoping by the end of the summer to have that completed with a tap room and grilled foods and all sorts. So, a place where people can come and find out how cider is made. And along in that space, we're going to be doing our experimental stuff. So some people will know that we've developed on-leaf fermentation, which is producing really interesting results, and we want to work on some very small fermentations running on ideas that have been developing in the cider works. So our biggest thing will be the cidery at Darts Farm.
Wonderful. And let's all rendezvous down there when we can. So thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to take some questions. So Tom Tibbets asked whether any of you guys had a commercial marketing background from a previous job or career before you launched into this. No, anything like that? No.
I started out in when I was at university. I edited the university newspaper, so I kind of had some training and background in journalism and talking rubbish. My degrees are in philosophy and English literature, so I've read everyone else's rubbish as well. So, but getting your words right matters. Okay, so that is that's as close to marketing as I can claim. I worked in the marketing department as well at the university, but I'm not sure how many great brains were assembled there, to be honest.
Emma Jordan's asking, how did you find your mentor? And was it someone you knew already or someone recommended? Polly.
I got my first mentor, and the one I still go to for advice now, through the Prince's Trust, which I'd be too old to do now, but yeah, I was young enough back then. So the Prince's Trust were brilliant with providing a mentor and also giving you a little bit of basic business advice.
That's very interesting. Yeah. How many people in your team, Barney, at the moment?
At the moment is quite a poignant comment, actually.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah, no, but I mean that we're an 80% on trade. So before lockdown we were 30. We're probably 18 at the moment. Maybe we're 20. But we're bringing people back online and back in, and so it's a very busy and exciting place at the moment, given as things are unlocking. But so a fair gang.
Yeah. Good luck with all of that, as all this unlocking. Andrew Root has asked, and if you don't mind revealing, at what age did the participants start their business? Maybe he's looking for some motivation there. So I was in my early 50s, so completely mad, but there we go. Charlotte, can I ask you, if you don't mind?
Yeah, no, I was 55 when I started this.
Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Polly, were you our spring chicken?
Yeah, I guess so. I think I was 27.
Haha.
No,
Great stuff. And Barney?
23, I think, maybe. Yeah, 23, 24. I was, but yeah, it finds you though, doesn't it?
Yes, that's very true.
Cider finds you.
Yeah, this is really, really very true. I'm just checking whether there's any other comments we'd like to pick up. Otherwise, I must let everyone go, because we've got the duty reform is one of the next sessions. So if anyone's got any other questions, do pop them into the Q&A, and then I can take a look at that. I think there's so many wonderful pointers that have come back. I'm going to be rewatching this session as well, along with everyone else, just to make sure. I mean, we've covered everything, really. We've covered the value of being careful when you buy, and also finding that secondhand bargain. And I think I'm going to go try and find Charlotte's provider of £1,000 forklift. That would be brilliant. Social media, crowdfunding, teams, relationships. But also I'm liking Barney's very positive look to the future, which is be confident. So I think on that note, I'll just double check again. Oh, Sam would like to catch up with you, Barney, and hear the whole joke at some stage. So I'll let you do that in the sessions after. But I just really want to say thank you so much. And also thank you, obviously, to Alan. I'm sorry he couldn't rejoin us. I think that's just the pressures of life, etc., etc. But Charlotte, Polly, Barney, thank you so much for sharing all your insight. And here's to building a sustainable cider business. Wassail. Thanks so much, guys. That was such fun. Now I think I need a cider. Take care, everyone. I look forward to seeing you in the not too distant future. Oh yes, exactly. Actually, I've got Alan's here as well. Can't wait to come and visit you all.